Okay, I said I would have a video discussing the travels of Israel through the wilderness, and so here it is. I will point out, first of all, that we really don't know exactly where they were traveling or where each of their stops was. We just know it was in the wilderness. But the wilderness is a very large area. So I'm going to show you a map that and show you how the most likely travels were, or the best guess we have right now, based on the information that we have and the information that we don't have. And it can be confusing because there's the records given in Exodus and in Numbers are not always exactly the same, using different names and stuff for places, as well as in Deuteronomy we get some new names. So piecing this all together is difficult, but we're going to try it. Oh, right. My son wanted to say hi. Say hi. So let us get to the travels of Israel. So here's our map. And as I said, we can't really tell exactly where things are. We don't know where most things were. We have some that we have an approximation of. We don't really know where all were, especially if we take this whole list from Numbers chapter 33. On this list, maybe a quarter of them, we have any idea where they are. So let's look at the map here, especially when we look at this map, this is the Sinai Peninsula. This is a little bit more modern map, but you get the general idea. The traditional site of the Mount Sinai is on the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. But even that is in dispute. There are those who do not think that is the correct location. But because that is the traditional spot, we will first look at this and what the journey of Israel would have looked like if Mount Sinai is here at the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. So to get a good look at this, let us zoom it in a little bit. And we have up in here in the Nile Delta, Ramses. This is where Israel first headed out, according to both Exodus and Numbers. They left Ramses. They would have crossed over Goshen, which is on the eastern side of the Nile Delta, to the city of Sukkoth. From Sukkoth they come to, according to Exodus, it's the wilderness of Shur, but in Numbers it says the wilderness of Elam. Maybe they're the same thing, just with two different names, or maybe they're two different areas that border each other in this area, but we have the wilderness of Elam approximately here. They would have stopped on the western side of the wilderness of Elam. But then it says that they turned back and went down to Pi-hahiroth, which is down in this area here. And this is where they crossed the Red Sea. Now, according to this map, this is just a little trickle of a stream here in the modern day, but it would have been much wider at the time of Moses. Having crossed here, let's move the map a little bit, they enter the wilderness of Elam, and they travel down south to Merah. And Merah is where Moses throws the tree into the water to heal the water. From Merah, they then go to Elam, and then they camp on the shore of the Red Sea. So this would have been along this western arm of the Red Sea. So let's move the map up a little bit so we can get the whole look here, because now we got from Elam, or from the camp along the Red Sea, which Elam and the camping along the Red Sea could possibly be the same place, but doubtful. But they would have come from here into the wilderness of Sin, approximately in this area. And this is where they first are fed with manna. Now after that, they go to Dafka, then to Elish, and then to Rephidim. Rephidim is where Moses first strikes the rock and water comes pouring out, but it is also where Joshua fights the Amalekites the first time, and Moses has to hold his arms up for them to win. Now the Amalekites are from up here. So there's a little bit of a confusion as to why they'd be down here fighting in Israel. Could be that they just heard Israel was coming and they went make a preemptive strike. We don't know. From Rephidim, they then go to Mount Sinai, which is also known as Mount Horeb. They're the same place. Possibly two different peaks in the same mountain range, or maybe Sinai is the mountain range and Horeb is the peak, or the other way around, but in this area. And they stay here for just over a year. They get here 3 months after leaving Egypt, and stay there for just over a year. From there, they are told to leave mountain and go to the mountain of the Amorites. But they make at least 2 stops on the way to the mountain of the Amorites, because they stop at Kibroth Hattaavah, which would be approximately here, going up the eastern arm of the Red Sea. And this is where you get the second event of God sending quails, but so many, and apparently dead, rotting quails, because as soon as they start eating them, they get sick and all that stuff. They next stop at Hazeroth, which apparently would also be along the Red Sea. This is where Miriam and Aaron challenge Moses, and Miriam is cursed with leprosy. All that happens. After this point, things get a little hazy, because we don't really know from this point. It says they go to Kadesh Barnea. And from there, they send out the 12 tribes. That's the next narrative event in the book of Numbers. Kadesh Barnea would be right about here on the edge of the wilderness of Paran. But the problem here is that, again, if we take a look at these names from Numbers chapter 33, Kadesh Barnea does not appear on this list. We have a Kadesh down here at the bottom, but it's too far down. It's too late in the travels to be when the tribes went out. So we have this. Where in this list of stops is Kadesh Barnea? Where did the tribes go out? Now we do read in Deuteronomy that they went from Horeb to the Mount of the Amorites. And if we look at this list, there is one mountain here, Mount Shapher. Now Mount Shapher is thought, again, this is just guesswork here, but it's thought to be in this area here, just west of Mount Seir, just south of the Dead Sea. There's this kind of mountainous spot here. This is thought to be Mount Shapher. Kadesh Barnea would be just west of that, so it could be that they went to Mount Shapher, as listed in Numbers 33, and they camped there, and then a smaller contingent went out to Kadesh Barnea, and from there sent out the spies. We don't know. It's a confusing thing. But even if that is true, we still have all these stops between Hazeroth and Mount Shapher. Where were they? We don't know. So for Hazeroth, they travel to 4 or 5 different places before they get to Mount Shapher, which could also be the same place or same general place as Kadesh Barnea, where these spies go out. From there, we get all this other stuff, all these other stops that, again, we got no clue where they are. But this is the time now that they are in the wilderness for the next 38 years. Because remember, the 40 years counts from the time they leave Egypt until the time that they enter Canaan. But they'd already been out of Egypt for about 2 years before the spies went out. So it's only 38 years from the time of the spies. But during those 38 years, we have all these stops listed here, and we don't know where they were. The one thing we can say is that it does mention Kadesh again. And this is where Miriam died, but it's also where Moses was told to ask the rock for water, and instead he struck it. And because of that, he is no longer permitted to enter the promised land. Is this Kadesh the same as Kadesh Barnea, or is it another Kadesh? Now, most people think it's the same one, which means they traveled around but returned to Kadesh Barnea, and that's where Miriam died and was buried. The next stop is Mount Hor, which is right here on the western side of the Edomites, in Mount Seir. This is Mount Hor. This is where Aaron died. Once Aaron dies, now it has passed. Now 38 years have now passed. We are in the 40th year of their travelings in the wilderness. And God says, okay, now it is time to go and get out of the wilderness. And they ask Edom if they can pass through on the king's highway, which would go cut across Edom. The Edomites say no. So instead, they go south, and we have these last few stops that are listed. We have there's like 3 or 4 more stops after Mount Hor before they come into the plain of Moab. So they probably come back towards that, but they circle down south of Edom and go around to the east side of Edom. They kind of go between Edom and Moab and up, and they conquer Sihon, king of Heshbon, and then go up north to conquer Og, king of Bashan. Now, as they're coming around this way up to Moab, Midian's in the south. They're coming around Edom. Midian's here. We have Moab and Ammon. And as they're in between here, this is when we have Balaam being hired to try and curse them. The Moabites hire Balaam to curse them. This is also where Midian and Moab kind of get together to tempt them into idolatry, and we have a big plague here. But then they conquer Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, and take this whole land in the north. This is where they are when Moses dies at the end of Deuteronomy. Then, right in this area here is Jericho, just across the river. This is where River Jordan, Joshua leads Israel across Jordan they take Jericho. They take Ai somewhere just west of there. And then from there, they stage their southern campaign and conquer all the southern area of Canaan. Then they return to Jericho and Ai in this area. Gibeon is also in here. And then they stage the conquest of the northern part. Now this is the travels that is generally accepted. This is how it generally goes. In fact, you can even look at this map in the Gazetteer in the study helps that the church publishes. And it shows this basic thing, cutting down to the southern point of Sinai, going up to Kadesh, going up through Ezion Geber to Kadesh Barnea, circling back to Ezion Geber and up into the Moab and all that. This is the basic route. Now, of course, they have it very evenly done here when it would have been much more erratic. They didn't, with all these stops, they weren't going in a straight line. They were going from one place to another to feed their flocks. They were in the wilderness, they had their animals, they needed food for the animals, so they would stop in one spot for a season, and or maybe 2 or 3 seasons, and the animals would feed. When the land was exhausted and the animals had no more pasturage, they would pick up and move on to another place. That's how it went. So they may have been here, then here, then here, then here, then here, then here, then here. They would have gone all over the place. They wouldn't have been in a nice, even trip. But as I mentioned at the beginning, there are other theories onto where Sinai was. And I'll just briefly touch on the most notable one. And that is that Sinai is actually over here, east of the eastern arm of the Red Sea. So that when they leave Ramses, they go straight across the Sinai Peninsula, and the crossing of the Red Sea is on the southern end of this eastern arm of the Red Sea. That's where they cross, and then this is Sinai, and they have all their wanderings over here, trying to cross over Edom to get in, and they can't, so they go east and up. My only issue with it, it's not a bad theory. My issue with it is that where did the spies leave from? Where's Kadesh Barnea? We almost know for certain that Kadesh Barnea is over here in what would be called the wilderness of Paran. So this is where they launched their spies from, but this is where they crossed the Red Sea. Then they had their wanderings. They crossed over here, sent the spies out, and then came back over here to wander around a bit. The wandering doesn't make as much sense to me. However, I want to point out that the traditional one also doesn't make a lot of sense to me because of Rephidim. Because this is where the Amalekites first attacked. This is a big battle where, as I say, Moses had to hold his hands up, and they won. And so they had Aaron and Hur holding his arms up for him. The Amalekites are from the northern end of Edom, or just at the south end of the Dead Sea. Why are they coming all the way down here to fight? This is like a 300-mile trip. Why would they do this? It makes more sense to me, this is just me personally, that Mount Sinai is not on the southern tip of the peninsula, not down here, but is more up in this area, towards the northeastern part of the peninsula. And that way they cut straight across, they cross the Red Sea at Pi Hahiroth right here. But instead of going down and up, they just go straight across to Sinai. And then we have Kibroth Hattaavah and Hazeroth and all this, and then we wander up into here. But if that's in here, this is Sinai, and Rephidim's just here, then they're close enough to the Amalekites to make that attack make sense. But that's just me. That's just my thoughts. Could be wrong. Okay, so now my son is still with me here. As you can see, you can probably hear him in the background in the rest of the video. But now that will conclude our discussion of the travels of Israel. I'm going to leave it here, and I hope you enjoyed it. Share, like. I know I don't say that often on my videos, but it would be nice. So I will leave it here. Say bye. Say bye-bye.